You're listening to Let's Get Surety. Let me hear your bonding talk with Kat Shamapande.
Hey everyone, it's Kat Shamapande. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Let's Get Surety. I am very excited for our episode today. I've got with me my co-host, Mark McCallum, CEO of NASBP. Hey Mark, thanks for being on.
Absolutely, Kat. I'm excited as well. We have a great guest.
We do. We've got another installment of our Corner Office series. And today to join us on this episode is Steve Ruschak. It's exciting to have you on, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kat. How are you?
And Steve Ruschak is the Executive Vice President of Surety at Arch Insurance Group. Steve, before we dive into more in-depth topics, can you just kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you found your career in surety?
That's not an easy story, but I can go back to the beginning. So I had graduated from law school, worked for a couple years in the environmental law sector, and was sitting around in Chicago collecting my 4 or 5 months of parachute payment. And my father got a hold of me and said, CNA just acquired somebody, you should call them up. And that was in August of 95. And within a week, I interviewed, and within 2 weeks, I started. So that opened up the doors to a wonderful career in surety, where I've been a claims attorney, an underwriter, a broker, and then ultimately taking over running a company, and where I finished up as a CEO of the company. And unbeknownst to me, the owner of the company accepted an offer. And so we were being sold to the largest property casualty company in Canada, Intact. And so I was sitting at home, just kind of figuring out what I was going to do and keeping busy. And the pandemic hit. And then I really started thinking about what I was going to do and got some self-care items taken care of. And Arch called me up, and lo and behold, 5 plus years later, I'm still in the seat.
That's interesting to hear that you had tried out so many different positions in the world of surety. So you just didn't come in and stick with one space. That's really interesting. Not everyone's done all those different positions.
No, exactly. And so, as I think about it, I think each one prepared me for what I ultimately ended up doing, which was running a company. I graduated from the executive MBA program at Chicago Booth. And I think that was what gave me the confidence that I could actually do the job. And so lo and behold, whatever it was, 15 years later, here I am and still in the chair.
Maybe it's worth going in a little bit more depth because, you really did have some unique experiences going through looking at the different sides to surety and the different elements. I remember a conversation with you at one point where you talked about being in Bermuda and reinsurance, for example, and things like that. Maybe go back. You also mentioned that your father had seen something with CNA. Was he in the industry?
He was. Yeah, my father was a broker. Initially, he was an agent in Wisconsin for Liberty Mutual in the 60s. And then he had a chance to go back to the Detroit area as a principal or assistant principal for an agency. And, through the course of his time there over 25 years, he went through the different steps of his career. And that kind of mirrored my own journey into surety. So, I wound up, Mark, just getting my feet wet. Actually, even before that, I took the AFSB exams and I got my designation. And then when I was at CNA, and actually I was on my honeymoon at the time, I said to my wife, I think we're being acquired. And she said, what makes you say that? And I said, well, here's all the things that they were asking me before we left. And I didn't have enough time to process it. And so I got to thinking about it. I'm like, sure enough, I think we're going to be acquired. So that just put us on our own journey of going to Bermuda. And we were down there for 5 plus years, and I had 2 kids. And then just the career took off from there. It taught me a lot about the business world. It taught me a lot about my own personal growth. And so I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I mean, surety in Bermuda couldn't have been too bad.
Well, it's interesting. So I was only one of 2 people that were down there doing surety. It was me and Bob Lamandola, who those of us who are of a certain age will definitely know who he is. And he and I would get together, 3 or 4 times a year and trade secrets and compare notes. And then a year and a half later, I couldn't travel to the States. I would have to go, if I needed to go to Canada, I would have to go to London and then back over. Yeah, and that, I'm half joking, but it just became part of the cadence of working down there. But eventually I was going to come back home, and Chicago was home at the time.
Wow. I'm sure when you're going through that, like you said, you're kind of acquiring different perspectives. You're building relationships, and you're seeing the kind of different elements that probably make up successful surety enterprises, right? So tell us a little bit more about your willingness to be flexible, to go into different directions in surety, and the importance of your relationships as you went about that.
Yeah, well, I had a bit of a test run at CNA. I guess, what was it, 2-3 years of renewals. And so when I went down to Bermuda right in advance of the 1104 season, I just got my feet wet. And then as time went on, I was able to dig in a little bit more and just expand my horizons a bit, just trying to get involved in different treaty renewals and different relationships, built the business up from ground up. Not quite ground up, but to about a $60 or $70 million operation. And I leaned on clients, and I leaned on, especially in the first year where I had to go travel the States and go get our message out that we were in the surety business, and then doing some other things in terms of political risk and trade credit. That was pretty interesting.
But on that journey, you must have seen that the larger industry, there was plenty of opportunities, and that you were willing to be able to be open to it and to seize those, when you could.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I got involved in Japanese renewals. I got involved in different lines besides surety, and just kind of dug into the renewals. And then, once I got to Chicago and I joined Willis Re, that put the context around what I was trying to do for my wife and our kids. And then that's when the Guarantee Company of North America came and knocked on my door and said, "Hey, would you come talk to us about joining their team and taking over their US company?" is basically what they asked me to do.
Right. And you were talking about that earlier, about building that presence. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I got there in September of 2009, and it was a listless ship, for lack of a better way to describe it. I was going around and introducing myself to people, and I believe I met everybody by the end of the year, which was pretty cool. And then was able to do an underwriting meeting or national meeting. I think the first of them was in Tampa. And, just kind of went from there, but launched a 5-year plan beginning in 11. So it was 11 to 15. And we kind of went from 26 to 28 to 35 to 40. It just kind of kept building it up from there in terms of the gross written premium.
As a leader, that has to feel good that you're seeing that kind of progression. And then you said, so you were doing it according to a plan that you implemented. Is that correct?
Yeah. So essentially what we did was I canvassed the group and took a lot of notes from my conversations with them, and largely put a plan together in the first year that ultimately became like the plan. So I think we got to let's say 30 million or 32 million in year one. And then from there, we went 35 to 40 to 45. So it was just like all the incremental blocking and tackling that you would do and trying to build out a business while planning it forward and taking it to another level. So every year that went by, or every quarter, essentially, we were, taking another step forward in terms of the 5-year plan. So ultimately we got to the 5th year, and then we decided to roll it forward and go from 16, 17, 18. I think we finished up at like 90 million in the US, or 92 million. And it was really gratifying to get to that point.
So, that's really interesting, Steve. They say your past is always preparing you for your future. seems like with all the experiences you had, that really set the stage for your ascension to run the surety operations at Arch. Would you agree with that?
I would for sure. So the first 6 months I spent at Arch, it was sitting in my home office. But finally in April, I was able to go to Philadelphia, and that's where a lot of the home office team was. And so I combined some marketing visits with meeting the home office people. And the reception that I got while I was there, I thought it was about me. And it turns out it wasn't about me. It was about like all of these people who for the last year plus had not seen each other. It was for 13 months. And it just got me thinking. And I just kind of actually took a step back and started watching them all. And they were hugging each other and catching up as if they had just seen each other in the office in the last week. And so I grabbed Dennis Stefano and Matt Hayden, who were the two lieutenants at the time, and I said, we got to get out on the road. And sure enough, that's what we did. So I think I took probably about 50 trips the rest of the year. Dennis might have even pipped me on the number of trips he took, but it was a needed time for me to get out and see people. And everybody was waiting for me to announce myself. And I think we did a pretty good job of it. It took a little bit of coordination and logistics, but I think we got our message out, and then continuing on into 22, where we really kind of took off.
I think that's really interesting. So, and I think it's worth exploring a little bit more about, since you've gone through these experiences, your feelings on how best to build a culture, particularly now for a surety company. Having stepped into that role, you just giving us that story, you obviously then perceived kind of the culture that you probably wanted to build and maybe how you were going to build it. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, definitely. So I didn't know the ins and outs of the organization, and that's what I took the first 6 months to kind of learn. And it coincided with doing a business review. So I think the business review was at the end of March, and then that coupled with me going out in April. And so, how do I put this? We went out and press flesh and say hi to people, but at the same time, start trying to figure out like what it was that we wanted to build within Arch. And, I think it kind of took off slowly during that 6 months, and then it grew from there. And then it culminated with our meeting in October with getting everybody together in Philly. Actually, it was at least the underwriters, and coming to grips with who we are and who we want to be. And then we just kind of went from there.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue as to telling us about where you see Arch is right now. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about the surety operations at Arch and what you think are your sweet spots and what your ambitions are?
So I think at the end of the day, we're a large commercial, large contract and transactional underwriter. We have about not quite 80 million of contract, about 72 million of commercial, and then add up whatever to get to 176 or 177, and then separate it out amongst the 11 profit centers in contract and the 6 in commercial. Everything in transactional kind of gets lumped in, but we're going to start splitting it out in terms of P&Ls, but focusing on the large contract and the large commercial. At 150, and for the limits that we can put out, I defy you to find anybody that's of our size that can put the amount of limit out there that we're able to put forth. And I try to just bucket everything in 3 simple buckets: find good talent, find good partnerships with producers, and then underwriting excellence. So it's efficiencies and excellence. We try to not be everything to everyone and try to find a few good relationships in the different marketplaces and then just go from there. And so we're not growing as much as maybe we did originally. And that's for a variety of reasons. But I would say that we're in a good spot going forward. We've kind of taken a step back in terms of where we want to be. And so we'll see where the market takes us in the coming years. Yeah.
Well, you alluded to the importance of your producer relationships. Maybe give us a little bit more on what you would characterize as your ideal producer relationship, what that might look like.
Sure. So I think it's got to be grounded on having as many touches with the producer as possible. So I've pushed forward the idea that our underwriters have to have relationships where they're writing 3 or more accounts, and some are writing 7 or 8. And so if your relationship isn't 1 or 2, then you need to figure out what are you going to do with that relationship going forward. I think most of them are going to be around the lines of we've got a pattern where we're going to grow significantly with that agent. It's just we're playing the long game, so we don't have to measure it in finite chunks of time. It can just go on for however long it takes to get to more than 3 account relationships. The commercial surety piece is a little different because it's not so linear or maybe it is linear, but they're not just waiting for us to write business with them. They've got multiple touches with us, and they're giving us other touches of business as well. So we'll see what happens in the near term, but for the long term, I'm pretty optimistic for it.
Steve, you and your team also not only obviously involved heavily in your day-to-day, but you do a lot of contributions to the industry as well. Could you talk a little bit about your volunteerism in the industry, as well as some of your senior team as well?
Yeah. So I always push the people that report directly to me, and then even the ones that report directly to them, with giving back to the industry. So I like to put forth my example of participating on the board of the SFAA. I think it's a great way to give back to the industry. I'll be going into the chairs in May, or I guess it's June. So that's coming up. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I know. I'm starting to rue the decision that I made way back when, but it's something that you could put your stamp on for the industry, and hopefully people will follow you. I would say that with Ryan work, we picked a really good leader for the business. And so he's taken off in the job. And I keep asking Mike Kymig, are you really busy with him? And he says, no, actually I'm not. So I think that's a good example of picking the right person for the position. And then relative to Dawn, Neville, Sarah Heineman, Ethel Pelletier, also varying levels of engagement, but trying to get them to be as involved with the organization. And then also now trying to get their direct reports involved with the SFA as well.
Well, we certainly feel very fortunate to have a number of them engaged in NASBP activities, including Dawn, who's a very dedicated faculty member of our Surety School, and Kat gets to work closely with her. And we see Ethel at a lot of our meetings, and it's providing so much good information to us. So thank you for that.
And I know Ethel's been heavily involved in both NASBP's Commercial Surety Committee and SFAA's Commercial Surety Committee as well. Her as a resource communicating between the two for many years, which has been invaluable.
That's good. That's great.
So, we hope to attract new talent to the industry, and we have an initiative about a surety career. And what kind of advice would you give somebody, maybe it's a finance major in college, why should they consider surety as a career?
Well, first and foremost, it's been really good to me. And I didn't know where this would all take me when I first got involved with it. I was probably hoping to have a nice little gig for a period of time, and not knowing that, here 30 years later, I was going to be sitting here talking to you guys. But, if you think about it, it's been a journey. It's taken me to a lot of different places. And it really wasn't until I got to the guarantee, and even first couple of years, it wasn't until I got my feet on the ground where I felt like I could contribute to the business itself. And then I would say, even in the last couple of years at the guarantee, I was able to impress upon the members of the EC, of the executive committee. And it broke my heart when I had to go tell Lee Covington that I was going to have to step down, and Mike Seff was going to step in for me because of the transaction. But they came to me pretty quickly after. And here I was worried about missing out on meetings and things like that. And it turns out that I didn't miss any meetings. I was able to slide right back into the board. So that's my own journey. I would say that for people coming up through the business is to do what my father told me to do, which is get your designation, however quickly you can do it, but get your designation and then start volunteering at the SFA, or excuse me, at the local Surety Association, and then see where that takes you. I was able to get involved at a lower level pretty quickly, and then was able to kind of like kept stepping up to the point where once I started participating at the SFA level, that gave me a path into the upper reaches of the business. So I would just say, look for your opportunities and see where it might take you. And it may not take you anywhere near where I got to, but if it does, it's definitely a worthwhile ambition.
It's so interesting. I've heard from so many volunteers that you get so much in giving back to the industry. Just that ability to give back gives you something in return, but then what you get from everyone else when you're giving back is even more.
Yeah.
I think your journey also shows that you get to have responsibilities early in your career, and that, you go about it the right way, opportunities will open up to you and for advancement, which I think is, any young person is probably going to want to hear that there are great opportunities and that they'll have responsibilities that they get to shoulder to have meaningful and purposeful work, and that they can benefit other clients in ways that they probably can't even imagine until they get to do it. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, before we let you go, with your unique perspective on the industry, when you're looking into the future for the surety industry, what's keeping you up at night when you think about the future and surety?
Yeah.
Not to put you in a hot seat, Steve.
No, my seat's kind of hot as it is. So, I worry about where we are collectively. I think we've had an unprecedented run of profitability. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer when it comes to pointing things out, but I think that we're on the cusp of maybe something that might, catch us by surprise. Renewables is a segment now that has some conversations around it. And then just, supporting contractors that are going to get bought up by private equity is clear that that's a potential problem. So what I would just tell the underwriters out there is to be very cautious in what you're doing and make sure that you're not joining a new company that maybe hasn't had a chance to prove its claims paying ability, for lack of a better way to describe it. I always like to, put forth the idea that you never know how a company is going to handle their claims until they actually get one. And, it could be like a significant one. And you see the list of top 40, top 50 surety companies. And you wonder if they get a 10 or 15 or $20 million claim, what's that look like for them? And so I would just caution, brokers and principals that, you got to pay attention to what your surety, can do. And so you need to ask those questions, is like, what's your ability to handle a major claim?
Right. Well, we can't end that way.
No.
So you gotta tell us what you enjoy the most about your job and your position.
I really enjoy getting out and seeing people. And in fact, I would say that in the last couple months, it's been a pleasant way to go about my day in terms of seeing people and, I don't know, pressing the flesh and shaking hands. I think that it has the ability to be really rewarding in terms of a business and to lead a group of people and just to get out of their way and let them, kind of shine. So that's what I tell my direct reports. I'm like, I'm here to support you as much as I can. And then I'm just here to move out of your way and let you thrive. So it's pretty simple in terms of what I'm able to do.
Nice.
That's great. Well, Steve, I want to thank you for being on with us today and sharing a little bit about your path into the surety industry and about Arch and your career there as well. It's been great having you on. Hopefully we can get you back again sometime in the future.
Thank you, Kat. Appreciate it, Mark.
You've been listening to Let's Get Surety, brought to you by the National Association of Surety Bond Producers. For more information about the NASBP and its members, visit nasbp.org.